6.02 Reaching Millions. When you finish this lesson, you should be able to describe the changes that occurred in sales and marketing and the reasons for them, explain the meaning of the term mass society, explain the role of universal education in the economic progress of Western Europe and the United States, explain why new leisure activities became popular in the late 1800s, and give examples of those activities. Identify new technologies that contributed to mass entertainment. Identify William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer and what they are known for. And summarize the methods Henry Ford used to bring automobiles to the masses. Changes between 1800s and 1900s. Most Europeans in the 1800s were poor peasants trying to scratch out a living from the soil. By the 1900s, there were bustling cities with lights, trolley cars, telephones, factories, and a growing middle class. The middle class. The middle class is the group of people who are neither rich nor poor. Many people in the middle class worked in offices, stores, factories, and other businesses. Mass society. The word mass refers to a large quantity or amount. By the 1900s, there was a substantial middle class, and factories were mass-producing goods. A growing number of people were looking for ways to amuse themselves, which led to mass entertainment such as movies, amusement parks, travel, and spectator sports. Methods of communicating such as telephones and telegraph were referred to as mass communication. How did stores change in the 19th century? Aristide Boucicaut and his wife built the first department store. It was an enormous store that displayed this merchandise in different departments, which customers could browse through. In the past, customers had not been able to see merchandise. They had just asked the sales clerk for the items they wanted. The Boucicauts also established fixed prices in their department store. Previously, customers had bargained with the sales clerks. The Boucicauts kept the prices low because they bought large quantities of merchandise. The Boucicauts also allowed people to buy merchandise on credit, which was unusual at that time. How did marketing to people in rural areas change during the 19th century? Modern machinery helped the farmers earn extra income, so they had money to spend. Traveling salesmen charged high prices and offered farmers little variety. Richard Warren Sears decided to send people in rural areas catalogs that offered goods for sale, so they could shop by mail. By the end of the century, Sears and his partner, Alva Curtis Roebuck, were mailing out catalogs that had more than 500 pages and offered thousands of products. Soon, many other companies started selling products through catalogs. More than just work. As shorter work hours and labor-saving home appliances began to allow people some leisure time, people started to seek new forms of entertainment. Many headed towards trolley parks, which offered dance halls, picnic tables, and carnival rides. Many people also began to attend sporting events. The most popular sport in the United States was baseball. In Great Britain, fans flocked to rugby and soccer games. In the United States of the 1890s, vaudeville became very popular. Vaudeville shows were variety shows that featured a wide variety of short acts that included everything from animal acts to short plays and comedians or jugglers. Technology also contributed to new forms of entertainment. After Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, people began to listen to famous singers in their own homes. Thomas Edison also invented the kinetoscope. It was the earliest device to show moving pictures or movies. The movies were very short and jerky. At first, the brief movies just showed actions, such as a sneeze, a boxing match, or a dance. Gradually, movies got longer and they began to tell a story. In 1894, the first kinetoscope parlor opened. Eventually, they began projecting the moving pictures onto a large screen. The first movie theaters were called Nickelodeons. Most of the early movies were silent. Nickelodeons declined as larger movie theaters were built to show longer movies. More to read for the people in the second half of the 19th century. High-speed printing presses led to mass printing, and dime novels, or penny dreadfuls, became very popular. Pulps were magazines printed on cheap wood pulp paper. They usually included science fiction and tales about cowboys in the American West. The two publishers who transformed the daily newspaper into a form of entertainment were Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. Their newspapers included many sensational stories, sports, comics, and news about entertainment. Inventions to reach the millions. Phonograph. When Thomas Edison invented the phonograph in 1877, he brought music out of the concert hall and eventually into the home. His first recordings were on cylinder covered with tin foil. Emil Berliner developed flat discs which could be mass-produced and made better recordings. Eldridge Johnson designed a better phonograph with a new kind of motor. Berliner and Johnson developed affordable phonographs called Victrolas. Pop stars emerged as radio and records became so popular. Kinetoscope. Thomas Edison's moving pictures on a kinetoscope eventually led to the development of an enormous movie and entertainment industry. At first, people could only watch a few flickering images that showed brief movements. In 1894, a kinetoscope parlor opened where customers could view 5 different kinetoscopes. A few years later, one of Edison's employees made an 8-minute movie that told a story. Movies became much more popular when people began to project the movies onto a large screen. Movie theaters called Nickelodeons opened across the country. At first, they showed silent films. Gradually, businessmen built larger theaters and producers made longer films with sounds. Today, millions of people watch movies every day in theaters and on television and DVDs in their homes. High-speed press. The invention of the high-speed press revolutionized the publishing industry and turned reading into a popular form of mass entertainment. In the early days, dime novels and penny dreadfuls, sensational newspapers, and pulp magazines attracted many readers. As more and more people received an education, more and more books, newspapers, and magazines are produced all over the world. Education. It was not until 1870 that the British Parliament passed a law saying all children should be educated, and until the 1890s that the public schools were really funded. Germany advanced public education in the 1870s and 1880s. In the United States, Massachusetts passed a law requiring children to attend school in the 1850s, and by 1890, most American children were attending school. In countries that had universal public education, most of the adults could read, so the countries developed an economic edge over countries that did not educate all their children. Henry Ford. When Henry Ford was growing up, he loved to take things apart and figure out how they worked. Henry Ford became obsessed with building a quadricycle, which was a small chassis with 4 bicycle wheels and a simple gasoline engine. Ford also called it his gasoline buggy. Ford's primary goal when he started the Ford Motor Company was to build a motor car for the masses. Ford finally figured out a way to build his Model T cheaply enough so that the middle-class people could afford it. He reorganized his factory into an assembly line of workers. Conveyor belts would deliver the automobile parts to the workers. Each worker would perform a specific task or add a specific part before the conveyor belt moved the automobile along to the next worker. The car changed America. Highways were paved, people began to work, shop, and go to school farther away from their homes. Suburbs and shopping malls flourished. Henry Ford, why I favor 5 days work with 6 days pay. Henry Ford believed that employees would get more work done in less time and work more efficiently. He reduced the working week in Ford plants all over the world to 40 hours with no cut in pay. And this is an excerpt from an article by Samuel Crowther from World's Work, October 1926, pages 613 to 616. Henry Ford made an announcement which, for the moment, turned industry upside down and brought workmen by the tens of thousands storming for jobs. His announcement was that thereafter the minimum wage in his industries would be $5 for a day of 8 hours. At that time, a good wage was $2.50 for a day of 10 hours. Now he makes another announcement far more important than the one which then went round the world. We have, he said, decided upon and at once put into effect through all the branches of our industries the 5-day week. Hereafter there will be no more work with us on Saturdays and Sundays. These will be free days. But the men, according to merit, will receive the same pay equivalent as for a full 6-day week. A day will continue to be 8 hours with no overtime. This decision to be put into effect, the short work week, is not sudden. We have been going toward it for 3 or 4 years. We have been feeling our way. We have during much of this time operated on a 5-day basis, but we have paid only for 5 days and not for 6. And whenever a department was especially rushed, it went back to 6 days, to 48 hours. Now we know from our experience in changing from 6 to 5 days and back again that we can at least get a great production in 5 days as we can in 6, and we shall probably get a greater, for the pressure will bring better methods. A full week's wage for a short week's work will pay. Does this mean, I asked, that your present minimum wage of $6 a day will become a fraction over $7 a day, that is? The minimum for 5 days work will still be $36, just as it was for 6 days? We are now working out the wage schedules, answered Mr. Ford. We have stopped thinking in terms of a minimum wage. That belongs to yesterday, before we quite knew what paying high wages meant. Now, so few people get the minimum wage that we do not bother about it at all. We try to pay a man what he is worth, and we are not inclined to keep a man who is not worth more than the minimum wage. The country is ready for the 5-day week. It is bound to come through all industry. In adopting it ourselves, we are putting it into effect about 50 industries, for we are coal miners, iron miners, lumbermen, and so on. The short week is bound to come, because without it, the country will not be able to absorb its production and stay prosperous. Don't find fault, find a remedy. The end.